I'm particularly interested in the comparison you made there with the United States of America, whereas you rightly say, at least in my experience, the flying of the Stars and Stripes is practically ubiquitous. I would say, though, that generally speaking, Americans feel confident of their patriotism and nationality in their own skin. Would it have
Do
been
they?
better? Would it have been
Isn't
better?
that under attack? Sorry. Now, aren't you being complacent? Isn't exactly one of the things that's happening with Trump versus the New Style Democrats a profound debate on the nature of being American?
True.
And there's also a wonderful article, something that I love using these talks to push good stuff online. There's an awful lot of rubbish. There's some amazingly good stuff. There's a thing called the Pimlico Journal, and it's just published an astonishing article attacking the myth of America as a society of immigrants, as the perfect multicultural society bound together only by adherence to a particular idea. And what it points, you're fond of statistics. Let me give you a statistic from this article, which is brilliantly evidenced, argued, beautifully written, very clear. In 1970, what percentage of the American population is foreign born? 1970.
I would guess it's going to be quite low. I'm going to guess
Well done.
5%.
You are within 1%. It's 4%.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was, in the 1920s, there was a deliberate decision taken to stop melting pot America. There was a deliberate decision to preserve, if you like, WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant in America. And it's not broken until 1968. It's not broken until Kennedy on the one hand and LBJ on the other. And the new America, and by the way, they changed the immigration rules at that point in exactly the same way that we did much more recently between 1997 and the present day. And they did exactly the same. LBJ, unsurprisingly, Kennedy, perhaps a little surprisingly, lied. They lied that there would be no consequences of a shift in ethnic makeup. But the really interesting point about this article, Mark, is that it argues, and this is a point we've often discussed, on why the American Revolution works, why the new Constitution of America works. What the article argues powerfully is that America was, as you and I know it was, transferred England. That the American population in the 1770s, 1780s, 1790s, when this extraordinary exercise of, if you like, ethnogenesis, the actual creation of a nation, the creation of a constitution took place, was essentially not so much homogenous, because there were different traditions which the names of the states tell you. The Carolinas are essentially founded in the mid-17th century, and the bulk of their population came from dispossessed gentry with the crisis of the Puritan Revolution in England, as opposed to the New England immigrants, who are of the opposite political and religious complexion. They're the Puritan revolutionaries from the Arminian triumphs of the reigns of James I and Charles I. But these are existing English traditions, and what both of them agree on is a political culture of self-government and debate. And the problem is, post-1970 in America, post-1997 in Britain, we have imported huge populations that do not share those values and are absolutely, and now totally proud of rejecting them.
Yeah.
They simply, and we shouldn't be surprised about this. After all, aren't we told by the left all cultures are equal?
Yeah.
But equally, what the left will not recognize, cultures are also different. It is this insane liberal belief that we're all the same. Liberal universalism, that you've got a universal man that's got universal rights. This is infinitely stupid.
Yeah, this is what I found quite interesting, participating in some, but listening to many debates about the flag, that those on the other side of the aisle, on the left, seem to sort of say, well, the St George's Cross and the Union Jack are all well and good as long as they bring people together. But they seem to mean that in some universalist way. I would have
A
thought the
flag is
flag,
to divide.
right,
The whole
it's an
a flag is to
exclusivity.
divide.
It
That's
is to say, I
exactly
am
the point.
British, not French, not American, not German. Yeah.
Which is why, I mean, Mark, you do appalling things like go to football matches, which my frail soul will go. But the flags are there to say you're different.
Yeah.
This is my side rather than your side.
Exactly right. I'm glad you made that point. I was going to bring that in because it's always my obligation to make a football reference. You're right. If you wear a football
I
shirt
usurp you.
in your team colours, you're not uniting the world of football. You're displaying your
Mm.
sectarian allegiance, and that's sort of fine, isn't it?
Of course, of course. But we need to recognise this. We also need to recognise that teams feel the need to be different.
Yeah.
I mean, you're all playing so apparently by the same rules. When I glance at those interminable things which Lineker used to rejoice us with, I mean, there's this team's got this character, another team's got another character. And you try to build up myths which are really another form of teamogenesis rather than ethnogenesis. But being serious for a second, isn't the whole thing so extraordinary? It is the left that has cultivated racism. We need to understand this. The things like the Equality Act pushed, to the ultimate by people like nice Trevor Phillips, some sort of mildly radical journalist. They're the ones that entrench race as a protected characteristic. It is the left that's pushed critical race theory, which turns whether you are white or black not simply into a conventional marker, but in the absolute grounds of your being, the grounds of your entire societies. It's the left who've argued that whiteness, Bhopal at Cambridge, Professor Bhopal at Churchill College, Cambridge, is the ones who says white people as white have no value. Can you imagine? They're the ones who've turned race into the ultimate marker. Again, DEI, diversity, equality, or equity and inclusion programs, they rest on the notion that diversity means you have to take account of all these different separate protected characteristics. Now, this is guaranteed. Talking about bringing people together is designed to do exactly the opposite. And if you give separate human rights to each one of these protected characteristics, you actually go back beyond the beginning of the state into a war of all against all. It becomes a Hobbesian state of nature. The left has deliberately dissolved civil society. It has turned individuals into something like the law of nations, the old-fashioned law of nations. That's where the problem arises. And it's been the shocking failure of us on the right to develop the proper doctrine. And the proper doctrine is very simple. Yes, you have the famous scene in Shakespeare, that extraordinary John of Gaunt scene in Richard II, the island set in a silver sea, the notion of England as a walled garden. You need the wall round the garden in order that the garden can be peaceful and flourish and have all different kinds of plants within it, and to have a culture that is founded on peaceful debate and not on civil war. And we can now see that the whole tendency of the left's endorsement of multiculturalism and the legal formulae that they've used to push it is actually leading, and I'll use this word now, directly to a kind of frozen civil war. We're in a cold civil war at the moment. Groups simply not speaking to each other. Both sides now adopting the doctrine that there is nothing in common. You look online, you look between those on the right and the left, each now, in my view, catastrophically has adopted the posture the other side is absolutely evil and must be suppressed. This is, again, that marvelous biblical phrase, by their fruits ye shall know them. The Epping protests are the direct fruits of multiculturalism and of the official multiculturalism of the British state, coupled, of course, with something else that we should perhaps talk about, the deliberate suppression of free speech, because multiculturalism has been carried as an official doctrine I talked again about the religiosity in the sense of this side, my side's right, your side is absolutely wrong, and a kind of negative image, a mirror image on the other side. But there's also, these doctrines are presented as religious. They are presented as not subjects of debate. Again, as in the whole transgenderism thing, a trans woman is a woman. End of. Now, that's not an argument. That's a creedal statement.
Yeah.
Diversity good, it's a creedal statement. White bad, it's a creedal statement. And we are, in other words, these are not simply civil wars, they're sort of war of religion.
This is really interesting, and I think you very eloquently explained the kind of patriotic or nativist backlash to all of this, which, to my mind, seems to be in part motivated by this two-tier status, that it's become, sort of the norm to raise the Pakistani flag and to eschew the Union flag.
Or still worse, the Palestinian flag.
Yeah. So, do you think the symbols of the UK or England in England, do you think they should have preferential status? I mean, do you
Of course.
think so? For example, Birmingham City Council should be allowed to, perhaps even obliged to, fly the Union flag and the St George's Cross, but should be, prohibited from flying flags of other nations. Do you think that should be the rule of the land?
There's a problem here, isn't there? I'm sure both of us will have attended a July 14th celebration in London for American independence, in which we've all been terribly ironic.
July 14th.
What am I talking? One of France, isn't it? Dear me, the slip of dates. One gets so confused between these revolutions. A July 4th celebration in America, where there's been this ironic self-mockery by the Brits, as you've been plied with vast quantities of rather good champagne on the terrace of some very expensive house in Belgravia, toasting the American Revolution. Again, St. Patrick's Day. I can see a specific case for specific events. But what terrifies me, nobody pretends that there are Irish enclaves. Well, they used to be sort of, but in a very minor sense of the word. The real problem, and the thing that makes it so alarming now, is that there are genuinely, they used to be called no-go areas. I think that gets it wrong. The whole policy of the multicultural state and the way the police force has dealt with it or not dealt with it has been effectively to let separate communities arrive which are self-governing, with their own community leaders, their own legal system, quasi-Sharia law, their own separate populations, largely Pakistani Muslim, and their own languages, with English barely spoken, their own values, which clash violently with ours. So what's happened is we have deliberate multiculturalism, and it's really important we understand this, has deliberately undone, as I said, 1,200 years of the progress of the English state. We were the first state actually to eliminate clans. The essential, border clans, the border reivers, the Welsh borders, Scotland last in the 18th century. Because what a clan is, it's a group of people held together by cousin marriage. And when we talk about the grooming gangs, we're using the wrong word. That's just the criminal aspect of the thing. But if you actually look at those charged, the masses of them, you'll find they're all related. They're brothers, uncles, second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins. And it's this family group in which the individual does not count at all, which is why in Sharia law, if the daughter of one family is raped, the appropriate punishment is having the daughter of the raping family raped as well. Now, this is directly against the whole triumph of the English monarchy in particular in breaking this stuff down and imposing. The reason that we used to have good law in England, the notion that we had equality before the law, was because the English kings, both the Anglo-Saxon and more particularly the Norman, were so strong that they could enforce their law on everybody. And it's also coupled at the same time with the decision of the Roman Church in 1215 to reinforce what had been a long-standing development to ban first cousin marriage.
Yeah.
And this is the basis of our extraordinary delicate balance between community and individualism. And what we're seeing with these rival communities, with their rival flags. And this takes us then, you ask the question, is it Northern Ireland? I'm afraid it is Northern Ireland. You have rival groups with rival flags, with rival values, and profound intercommunal hostility.